The story I'm about to share should fill me with pride. It's a tale of unyielding courage, exceptional valor, and heartbreaking loss. But instead, it's a patchwork of memories I've tried to bury, a defense mechanism, I guess, to shield myself from the trauma of what happened. The lead up to that day remains sharp in my mind, but the events during and after feel like fragments of a shattered mirror. I've pieced some of it together through reports and accounts from others who were there, my squad leader, platoon sergeant, and commanding officer. This isn't just my story, it belongs to all of us. The mission seemed straightforward enough. Load up a convoy of 4 transports with medical supplies and comms gear, deliver them to an outpost in desperate need, and get a signature. Easy. As the medic assigned to the unit, my responsibility was ensuring the medical supplies were accounted for. Meanwhile, my platoon sergeant handled the radio equipment. During the loading process, I paused to ask him a question. Should I grab extra ammo? Space is getting tight, I said, gesturing toward my rig. He hesitated for a moment, then turned to a nearby soldier. Hey, is anyone carrying extra mags? He called out. We're full up, Sergeant, the soldier replied without missing a beat. My sergeant turned back to me. Take whatever you can fit, Astra. Never leave home without spare ammo, he said with a dry chuckle. I managed a small grin, heading off to scrounge up a few more rounds. Once everything was loaded, we climbed into our transports, 4 rugged vehicles stuffed to the brim. We'd recently lost a team member, and a couple of others were benched, so our ranks were thinner than usual. Still, it felt like another routine day of navigating the unforgiving wasteland that stretched out before us. I'd heard we'd be passing by the valley. It offered the rare promise of greenery, a lush contrast to the desolate brown that dominated the landscape. But that beauty was deceiving. The valley was a birthplace of insurgency, and every soldier knew it as the cradle of chaos. As we rumbled along, someone decided to test the resilience of our battered sound system. A weathered device, practically ancient, lit up, and a familiar Credence song filled the vehicle. Turn that off. You'll jinx us. I barked with a laugh. Superstition? Maybe. But in this line of work, even the smallest rituals felt like lifelines. With an exaggerated eye roll, the soldier swapped it out for a rock track, 3 days grace, if I remember right. A small victory. The road, if you could call it that, was little more than a rough line carved into unforgiving terrain. Edie had cleared this stretch often, as it served as a key route between bases. But halfway through, we'd veer off onto a barely distinguishable path leading to the forward operating base. Before setting off, we'd been briefed to remain vigilant for roadside bombs. Anything out of place, rocks, debris, odd shapes, had to be reported immediately. Above all else, we were ordered to stick to the road. Stray from it, and you were as good as gone. IEDs weren't the only concern, though. The jagged outcroppings and uneven terrain hid dangers just as deadly. Around midday, we took a quick break. MREs came out, and the atmosphere lightened. I don't recall exactly what I had, but I know it wasn't one of the truly awful ones. If you know, you know. Between bites, we joked, sang off-key, and tried to remind ourselves we were human, if only for a little while. The radio snapped us back to reality. Eyes up, team. We're heading off-road. Humvee 2, that was us, slow your pace. Humvee 1, your point. Report anything unusual, over. Our squad leader turned to us from his spot in the passenger seat. If things go south, someone better be on that turret in 2 seconds flat, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The easy camaraderie from moments earlier vanished as the gravity of the situation settled over us. I tightened my grip on my weapon and scanned the terrain. A boulder, about the size of a kid. A skeletal tree stripped of life. A shallow dip in the dirt. Each detail etched itself into my mind. You learn quickly in this line of work, the mundane can kill you. The sky stretched out above us, an unbroken expanse of blue. The sun hammered down, bouncing off the metal husks of our vehicles. Every creak, every bump in the road seemed amplified. I turned at one point, thinking I'd spotted movement, but nothing materialized. The soldier next to me leaned closer. You good, Astra? He murmured. I nodded, though my throat felt like sandpaper. Yeah, fine, I whispered back, more to convince myself than him. The radio crackled again. Humvee 1, report, came the voice from command. All clear up here, replied the lead vehicle. There was a pause, then a hint of levity. Spotted some sheep earlier. Anyone want to stop for dinner? We chuckled, but the response came sharp and serious. Focus 1. Roger, was the curt reply. For a moment, the world was quiet, save for the hum of engines and the rattle of gear. Then the world turned inside out. The explosion ripped through the air, and Humvee 1 was launched skyward. It felt like the ground itself had erupted in fury. Metal twisted and screamed, and the vehicle landed in a crumpled heap far off the road. Our own transport skidded to a halt as chaos consumed everything. Before I could even process what had happened, darkness overtook me. I came to in a haze, my mind swimming in confusion. The sky seemed to be spinning, or maybe I was. Sounds hit me in disjointed bursts, gunfire pinging off metal, shouts echoing over roaring flames, the distant thud of explosions. Clarity slammed into me like a freight train. This wasn't a nightmare. This was my reality. Medic. Get the fucking medic, someone bellowed. I felt a sharp tug as my body was dragged backward, my vest scraping against the jagged ground. Twisted metal loomed over me, the remnants of one of our Humvees. My eyes locked onto a face above me, my squad leader, his expression a mix of terror and fury. Astra, get the fuck up. The urgency in his voice snapped me out of my stupor. An ear-splitting boom cut through the chaos as a rocket whistled overhead, slamming into the dirt with enough force to rattle my teeth. Debris showered down, but I barely noticed. Drivers hit, my SL yelled, pointing to a soldier sprawled out in the open, blood pooling around him. Instinct took over. Before my squad leader could stop me, I bolted into the kill zone, bullets slicing through the air like deadly whispers. Sliding onto my stomach, I crawled to the injured soldier, my heart pounding in my ears. His leg was a mess, blood spurting from a torn artery. Adrenaline drowned out the chaos around me as I worked. Stay with me, damn it. I growled, wrapping a tourniquet high on his thigh. The bleeding slowed, but my supply kit was a sad, ransacked version of what it should have been. I cursed under my breath. Hold on, you're not dying on my watch. Grabbing his vest, I dragged him toward cover, every inch feeling like a marathon. My SL's voice cut through the haze. Sniper. Down. A shot rang out, and I felt the impact before I heard it. The force threw me onto my back, the breath knocked from my lungs. My chest plate had stopped the bullet, but pain radiated from what I knew were broken ribs. Gritting my teeth, I gave a thumbs up to the blurry figure rushing toward me. The ground shook as a grenade landed near the wreckage. Time slowed as one of our guys threw himself on it without hesitation. The muffled explosion that followed was both heroic and gut-wrenching. His sacrifice saved us, but there was no time to grieve. The battle raged on. More down the line, my SL shouted, pointing toward the next vehicle. I nodded, pushing through the pain as I sprinted across the battlefield. An explosion sent me sprawling, but I clawed my way to the next soldier. He was alive, barely, with a sucking chest wound. My hands worked on autopilot, sealing the injury with the last of my chest vents. A cry from above drew my attention. Our gunner was hit, slumped in the turret, his shoulder shredded. I scrambled into the Humvee, pulling him down and stabilizing his wound as best I could. My supplies were gone, but I wasn't stopping. Not now. Every movement was agony, every second a fight against the chaos threatening to consume us. But I wasn't done. Not until every life I could save was accounted for. I'm hit, the gunner screamed. His shoulder was torn apart, tendons barely holding on. I yanked him onto his back on the ground below. Astra, don't let me die, he sobbed. You're not going anywhere, I muttered, focusing on the wound. Tourniqueting his arm was a nightmare, but I managed, packing and wrapping the torn flesh with what little remained in my kit. Morphine followed, a fleeting mercy amid chaos. As I moved from cover, an RPG streaked past me, detonating nearby. Shrapnel sprayed the air, and I dove to the ground. Pain racked my chest with every breath. Broken ribs, maybe worse. Where's the comms? I shouted. A soldier pointed to a radio coated in blood. Its operator lay motionless beside it, his neck mangled. My stomach churned, but I grabbed the radio and ran through gunfire to the next vehicle. Call, backup, can't, breathe. I rasped, collapsing at the platoon sergeant's feet. He grabbed the radio and waved me off as bullets thudded against the metal. Medic, a shout came from behind, and I forced myself upright. A specialist writhed in agony, his leg shredded below the knee. I crawled to him, using my last tourniquet. Stay with me, I ordered as darkness threatened my vision. My strength was spent, and I passed out. I woke to gunships overhead, their fire obliterating enemy positions. Astra, stay down, someone shouted, but I sat up groggily. Reinforcements had arrived. The battle was over, and the survivors were being evacuated. My squad leader dragged me to a chopper. See you back at base, he said before running back to help others. I woke again in a hospital bed, my body battered and bruised. You're a damn hero, my commander said. The words felt hollow. 2 of our team were gone, and 6 were injured. The memories of the fallen haunt me, their faces, their families, the laughter we once shared. Survivors' guilt is a heavy burden, but their sacrifice won't be forgotten. They're the true heroes of this story. The weeks following the battle passed in a blur of physical therapy and restless nights. Nightmares stalked my sleep, but it was the quiet moments that cut the deepest. I'd catch glimpses of their faces in the corner of my mind, faces I couldn't save. Those were the moments I felt the weight of every second I'd spent in that kill zone. But healing wasn't optional, it was a mission. And if there was one thing the battlefield taught me, it's that you never leave a mission half-finished. Astra, ready for your evaluation? The voice of Lieutenant Jackson brought me back to the present. He stood in the doorway of the med bay, his expression unreadable. I nodded, standing with more confidence than I felt. Born ready, I quipped, though my ribs still ached with every breath. The evaluation was a formality, really. A check to ensure my cybernetic implants were still functional and that I hadn't compromised the mission by getting my ass handed to me. The neural HUD, a glimmering overlay in my vision, scanned the room as I stepped into the med station. It flagged nothing out of place. Good. At least one piece of me wasn't broken. Dr. Anders, a stern-looking woman with augmented eyes that flickered like shifting data, motioned for me to sit. You've been through the ringer, Vane, she said, not unkindly. Let's make sure you're still in one piece. I snorted. What's left of me, anyway? As she ran her scans, I let my thoughts drift. The mission wasn't over. The squad's work wasn't done, and neither was mine. The supply run was just one cog in the machine, a small piece of a much larger war. We'd completed it, but not without loss. And now, the battlefield was calling again. You're good to go, Anders said, snapping me back to reality. Cleared for active duty. Thanks, Doc, I replied, sliding off the table. My gear was waiting, polished and repaired. I strapped the armor back on, feeling its familiar weight. It was heavier now, not because of the plating, but because of everything that had happened. Every scar and memory added to the load. The squad's next assignment came down within hours. Another convoy, but this time we weren't delivering supplies. We were hunting. Intelligence reports had tracked the insurgents who ambushed us, and Command wanted us to return the favor. A strike mission. They're sending us back out there, I said, glancing at the team. My squad leader, still bruised but as resolute as ever, nodded. We'll finish it, he said. His words were simple but carried the weight of a promise. The vehicles roared to life, and the familiar hum of engines filled the air. I tightened my grip on the handle of my smart rifle, its interface syncing with my neural implants. The HUD displayed weapon diagnostics, enemy probabilities, and terrain maps in a dizzying array of data streams. I took a breath. Focus. The valley loomed ahead, its jagged cliffs casting long shadows over the rocky expanse. This time, there was no music, no jokes, just the steady rhythm of determination pounding in my chest. We weren't just a supply run anymore. We were the storm. New expanded content. The convoy moved with a precision honed by shared trauma. Every mile brought back echoes of the ambush, but now we had an edge: revenge. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. As we reached the outskirts of the valley, the neural HUD flagged unusual heat signatures up ahead. Astra, you see this? My squad leader's voice crackled through the comms. Confirmed, I replied, zooming in on the data overlay. Several figures moved along the ridgeline, their silhouettes betraying weapons. It was an ambush in reverse. Positions, he ordered. Our convoy halted, vehicles forming a defensive semicircle. I climbed onto the roof of the lead transport, scanning the terrain with my smart rifle. The weapon's targeting system synced with my HUD, highlighting threats in red. The first shot came from above. A sniper. I dove behind the vehicle's turret as the round slammed into the metal. Sniper, East Ridge. I shouted, tagging the location on the map for the squad. The .50 cal turret roared to life, sending tracers into the rocky perch. Suppressing fire. Move up, came the command. The squad split into fire teams, advancing on foot while the vehicles provided cover. My heart pounded as I moved with the lead team, using the chaos to close the gap. Explosions erupted around us, the enemy trying to hold their ground. I caught sight of a figure ahead, his weapon trained on our flank. Before he could fire, my rifle locked onto him, and I squeezed the trigger. The shot landed clean, and he crumpled. No time to dwell. Another figure appeared, then another. The air was a symphony of gunfire and shouted commands. As we pushed forward, I spotted the enemy's command post nestled in a rocky alcove. Command, I have eyes on the target, I reported. Marking coordinates for artillery. A confirmation came through, and moments later, the earth shook as ordnance rained down on their position. The insurgents broke, their lines collapsing under our assault. Sweep the area, the squad leader ordered. We moved methodically, clearing the remaining pockets of resistance. The valley fell silent, save for the crackle of fires and the hum of our vehicles. Victory came with a heavy cost. As we regrouped, I checked on the wounded. Several were injured, but we'd avoided any fatalities this time. Good work, team, the squad leader said, his voice weary but firm. Let's pack up and head home. The weight of the past missions clung to me like a shadow, a constant reminder of what we'd faced and what we'd lost. As we returned to the base, the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by an unsettling calm. But the calm didn't last. Vane, debrief in 10, came the sharp voice of Lieutenant Jackson. Over the calm there was no room for delay. I dropped my gear at my quarters, barely pausing to wipe the dirt, and stood off my face before heading to the operations center. The room buzzed with energy. Screens displayed live feeds of multiple zones, heat signatures flaring red against the landscape. Our tactical map lit up with enemy activity, dots shifting and clustering in a pattern that sent a chill down my spine. The insurgents were regrouping faster than expected. Sitrep? I asked, stepping up to the table where Jackson and a few other officers huddled. Jackson didn't look up. They're moving east. We've intercepted comms indicating a high-value target is traveling with them. The words hung in the air like a challenge. A high-value target. That meant a quick-strike operation, something precision and brutal efficiency would solve. We're assembling a strike team, Jackson continued. His eyes locked onto mine. You're leading the medical unit. I nodded, though the weight of the responsibility pressed against my chest. There was no time for hesitation. As I left the room, my neural HUD pinged with updates, new orders, tactical overlays, and logistical support for the mission. Preparation was methodical. I inspected my equipment, making sure everything was operational. The smart rifle's targeting system flickered briefly, a reminder of its recent wear, but it synced with my HUD without issue. My medical pack was restocked, tourniquets, nanosutures, and stimulant injectors. I wouldn't be caught unprepared this time. The strike team assembled on the tarmac under the glow of floodlights. Drones hummed above us, their AI-driven cameras providing a constant stream of intel. The hum of engines roared to life as we loaded into the transport. It was time to move. The journey was tense, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. The team knew what was at stake. Our transport veered low over the terrain, hugging the valleys to avoid radar detection. My HUD flickered with real-time updates, enemy positions, potential hazards, and primary objectives. 2 minutes to drop, came the pilot's voice. The cabin shifted as we prepared to disembark. My heart raced, but my breathing remained steady, a practiced rhythm I'd mastered after countless missions. The transport hovered over the designated drop zone, and the rear hatch opened. The team disembarked quickly, boots crunching against the dry earth. The air was still, heavy with tension. We moved in formation, the landscape illuminated only by the faint glow of our HUD overlays. The target was a heavily fortified compound nestled in a canyon. Surveillance had indicated multiple guard posts, automated turrets, and layers of security measures. A direct assault would be suicide. Recon units, move, the squad leader ordered. Drones zipped ahead, feeding back data. I watched the feed on my HUD, mapping out the terrain and enemy positions. The first contact came sooner than expected. A patrol unit emerged from the shadows, their chatter breaking the silence. The lead operative signaled, and the team spread out. Shots rang out, muffled by the suppressors, and the patrol fell before they could raise the alarm. Clear, came the whisper through the comms. We moved forward, every step calculated. As we approached the compound, the scale of the operation became clear. Guard towers loomed above us, their searchlights sweeping the area. Automated turrets scanned for movement, their sensors calibrated to detect even the faintest heat signatures. The squad split into 2 teams. One would create a diversion, drawing attention away from the main approach. The other, my team, would breach the compound and locate the target. The diversion worked flawlessly. Explosions lit up the night, and enemy forces scrambled to respond. My team slipped through the chaos, moving swiftly toward the compound's perimeter. A breaching charge took out the first barrier, and we slipped inside. The compound was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one more fortified than the last. My HUD flagged heat signatures up ahead, enemy combatants. The team moved silently, taking them down one by one. We reached the central chamber, where the target was supposed to be. The door was reinforced, but a high explosive charge made short work of it. Inside, we found the target, a man surrounded by armed guards. The firefight that followed was chaotic, a blur of gunfire and shouted commands. My smart rifle locked onto targets with precision, the HUD guiding my every shot. When the dust settled, the guards were down, and the target was in custody. Exfiltration was no easier. The compound's defenses were on full alert, and enemy reinforcements were closing in. We moved quickly, using the chaos to our advantage. The transport hovered above the extraction point, and the team loaded up just as enemy fire rained down around us. As the transport ascended, I slumped against the wall, exhaustion setting in. The target sat across from me, his expression one of defiance. But for the team, this was a victory, a hard-fought, costly victory. Back at the base, the debrief was brief. The mission was a success, but the scars it left would linger. As I returned to my quarters, I felt the weight of it all. The faces of the fallen, the burden of survival, it was a cycle I couldn't escape. But as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I knew one thing. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. The high-value target sat slumped in the interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the cold metal table. I watched from behind the one-way glass, arms crossed, my mind racing. The mission was a success, but the cost had been steep. Every injury, every sacrifice, would it mean anything if we couldn't extract what we needed from this man? Lieutenant Jackson entered the observation room, his jaw set like stone. "He's not talking yet," he said, glancing at me. But that's not surprising. His type never breaks easily. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the man in the room. "What's the plan?" Jackson exhaled sharply, a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. "We've got interrogators working on him. But Vane, this guy? He's not just another insurgent. We're picking up chatter. His capture has stirred the hornet's nest." "What kind of chatter?" I asked, my tone low. "Retaliation," he replied. And soon, the base shifted into high alert within hours. Patrols doubled, drones scoured the surrounding terrain, and defensive systems were tested and retested. The tension was palpable, a storm building on the horizon. I busied myself in the med bay, checking supplies and running diagnostics on the advanced medical drones. They were designed for battlefield triage, capable of administering first aid and stabilizing critical injuries. Despite their sleek design and cutting-edge tech, I couldn't shake the feeling that they wouldn't be enough. The unease grew as the hours dragged on. My neural HUD pinged with updates, minor skirmishes on the perimeter, suspicious movements in the surrounding hills. Each notification sent a jolt through my system. We were being watched. The attack came at dawn. The first explosion rocked the base, sending a plume of smoke and debris into the sky. I was already on my feet, grabbing my gear and sprinting toward the central command post. The comms were alive with shouts and static, chaos spilling over into every channel. Perimeter breached on the west side. Multiple hostiles inbound. A voice crackled. The base transformed into a war zone. Automated turrets whirred to life, their barrels spitting lead at the advancing enemy. Soldiers scrambled into defensive positions, their rifles barking in response. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. I moved with the med unit, setting up a makeshift triage station near the command post. Injured soldiers were already pouring in, bloodied and shell-shocked. My hands worked on autopilot, applying tourniquets, injecting painkillers, stabilizing wounds. The med drones zipped around me, their mechanical arms assisting where they could. The assault was relentless. Enemy forces pushed closer, their numbers seemingly endless. I barely had time to breathe between patients, each one a reminder of the high stakes we were facing. "Astra." The voice cut through the chaos, and I turned to see Sergeant Cole running toward me, his face grim. "They're targeting the command center. We need medics closer to the front." I didn't hesitate. Grabbing my gear, I followed him through the maze of sandbags and debris. Bullets whizzed past us and explosions sent shockwaves through the ground. The command center was under siege, its reinforced walls pocked with bullet holes. As we arrived, a mortar round struck nearby, the blast throwing me to the ground. My ears rang, and for a moment, everything was a blur. I pushed myself up, shaking off the disorientation, and crawled toward the nearest wounded soldier. The battle raged on for hours, each minute feeling like an eternity. Our forces were stretched thin, every resource pushed to its limit. But the enemy's momentum began to falter. Reinforcements arrived, gunships and armored vehicles that turned the tide in our favor. By the time the last shots were fired, the base was unrecognizable. Smoke hung heavy in the air, the ground littered with debris and bodies. I stood amidst the wreckage, my chest heaving, blood, some mine, most not, streaking my armor. The aftermath was a grim reflection of the cost of survival. We lost good people that day, their absence felt in every quiet moment that followed. But the high-value target remained in our custody, and the intelligence we extracted from him proved invaluable. It revealed a network of insurgent strongholds, a roadmap to dismantling their operations. But there was no time to dwell on the victory. War doesn't stop for grief. Days later, I found myself on another mission, this time deep in enemy territory. The intel we'd gained led us to a key supply depot, one that fueled the insurgents' operations across the region. The objective was clear: destroy it. The approach was perilous, the terrain unforgiving. We moved under the cover of night, our path illuminated only by the faint glow of our HUDs. The depot loomed ahead, a sprawling complex guarded by watchtowers and patrolling soldiers. The plan was surgical. Drones would disable the external defenses while we infiltrated and planted explosives. But as we breached the perimeter, the operation took an unexpected turn. Inside the depot, we discovered more than just supplies. Rows of cages lined one of the buildings, each one holding prisoners, men, women, children. Their hollow eyes stared back at us, a mixture of fear and desperation. "This wasn't in the intel," one of my teammates muttered, his voice tight with anger. "We can't leave them," I said firmly. "We'll free them and destroy the depot." Both. The rescue operation was chaotic. We fought to secure the area while simultaneously freeing the prisoners. They were weak, malnourished, some unable to walk. My medical skills were pushed to the limit as I worked to stabilize them for extraction. The explosives were set, the prisoners loaded onto transports, and the team made a desperate dash for safety. As we cleared the blast radius, the depot erupted in a fiery explosion, a plume of smoke marking our victory. Back at the base, the rescued prisoners were given food, medical care, and shelter. Their gratitude was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the grim reality of our work. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. But hope is fleeting in war. As I prepared for the next mission, I knew the fight was far from over. There would be more battles, more losses, more victories. And I would face them all, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. This was my reality, my purpose. And I wouldn't let it break me. Not yet.